Hey, it's Jessica. From the outside, my life seemed perfect. My family is wealthy, I'm beautiful, shining bright, and even my job is fancy. But from the inside, I do have a character flaw. It's my short temper that almost caused me to lose everything. I've always been Daddy's little princess, which means that anything I want, I have to get, such as new clothes, a new car, and exotic vacations. Because of this, other girls have always been jealous of me. But Kath was different. She realized there's so much more to me than my designer outfits and glossy hair. Kathy's family lived nearby. You see, my dad was friends with Kath's father, who passed away when she was little. But being the nice guy my dad is, he continued to support them. He paid for Kath's education, so we went to the same school. She was the only friend who could handle my short temper. I know, that wasn't nice, but it was hard dealing with the average girl's jealousy toward me. As a result, there were a few incidents. One time, when I was just a primary student, some girl dared to put on my shirt after sports. She said it was an accident, but as if. I yelled at her that she'd stretched it, and now she owed me a new one. Kath tried to defuse the situation, but she just got caught up in the middle of the shouting match. Literally, as me and this girl were screaming insults at each other across Kath. Then another time, some kids sat in my seat in the canteen, and when I asked them to move, they refused to. I was fuming, so I poured my custard all over them. Seeing as the kids were about to get crazy, Kath passed them a napkin, hurriedly apologized to them, then led me out of there before I covered them in more of my lunch. She understood how mad I got on things, but never got annoyed at me about it. This is why our friendship continued into adulthood. It was perfect to have a friend like Kath to grow up with, but what made my life even more perfect was the arrival of our boy next door. Yes! A new family had just moved in, and my mom told me that a cute boy my age was going around meeting people. I ran out to suss it out and find Kath standing on her front porch and talking to a super cute guy. I swished out my hair and tottered over to them. "Hi, Kath." I smiled at her. Then I turned to him and said, "Hi there. We definitely haven't met before, 'cause there's no way I'd forget you." He smiled back and introduced himself as Andrew and said he lived on that block. I sat down on the couch in Kath's house and did my research on Andrew and found out he was a pretty famous influencer. His dad ran off with another woman and started a new family, so Andrew lives with his mom and Nan. And best of all, he was single. I pulled on Kath's arm and insisted that she help me beg Andrew as my man. She looked a little awkward at first, but then she reluctantly agreed to help. I persuaded Kath to pretend that she lost her phone, then I went round to Andrew's and begged him to come and help us look for it. He spent the whole afternoon trying to help us look for it, only to hear it buzzing in my pocket. Oops. Then one time, well, this wasn't planned, but I managed to get one of my new heels stuck in a drain cover. I was standing there yelling at it when Andrew walked past and told me to take my shoe off. I refused. Did he have any idea how expensive they were? He just laughed and told me to lean on him while he carefully unwedged my shoe. Whose heart wouldn't melt for this gentle guy? After that, we started to talk more, and then chatted every day. He had a sense of humor and was very gentle toward me. It is so wonderful to know that he was impressed by how cute I was, hiding Kat's phone in my pocket to find a chance to make friends. How embarrassing, but seemed like he liked that. After 2 months, he asked me out on a date, and soon we became an official couple. I loved being around his family, as his mom and grandma were so sweet and friendly. Then my dad said he needed me to go on a 3-month business trip in San Diego. I didn't want to leave Andrew for so long, but there was nothing I could do about it. Ugh, being an adult sucked sometimes. I just had to pack up and take a flight to San Diego, then finish the job as quickly as possible. Little did I know how terrible things could happen in the next 3 months. One night, my mom called me up. She was furious, and at first, I couldn't work out what she was saying. Finally, she calmed down enough for me to make her words out. "Jess, I found the DNA test hidden away in one of your father's filing cabinets. Kath is his biological daughter. This whole time, he's been lying to us. I cannot put up with this. I'm divorcing him, and I won't be happy until he's left with nothing." What? Kath was my sister? No, it couldn't be. I called up Kath to get to the bottom of this. As soon as she picked up, I screamed at her. "Your dad's my dad. How could you keep this a secret? You're trash, and so's your mom. You're both vile, ugly gold diggers, and I hate you both." Kath spluttered out. What? Huh? I don't understand." "You heard me. You're trash, and so's your mom. She's nothing more than a man-eating, money-obsessed liar, and I hate her." Sobbing, Kath replied, "Don't talk about my mom like that." This only made me angrier, so I yelled, "I will say what I want to. I hate you, and I hate her. I hope you both fall down a pothole and never get out." Suddenly, I heard a voice say in the background, "Who are you talking to? And why are you so upset?" I knew that voice. It was Andrew's. Why was he with Kath? I was about to scream out at her to stay away from my man, but she hung up. I immediately tried calling Andrew, but he didn't answer. I was so angry I screamed out, then went into the kitchen and started smashing glasses onto the floor and swiping things out of the cupboards. The next day, Andrew called me. I thought he was going to try and worm his way out of what he did, so I answered with a, "Oh, hi, Andrew. It's nice to finally hear from you." He replied, "Hi, Jess. Look, I have something important to tell you. It's my grandma. She's in the hospital, and I can't afford the medical bills. I hate asking, but please, could I borrow some money?" Furious, I yelled, "Who do you think you are? You did the dirty behind my back, and now you have the cheek to ask for my help? It's none of my business, dude." He fell silent, then hung up. At first, I was fuming. How dare he do that to me? But once I had time to calm down, I thought maybe I had overreacted a tiny bit. I mean, I could have given him a chance to explain, so I tried calling him again, but he didn't answer. I called Kath, and in my calmest voice, I asked her to tell me what was going on. She said she had no idea that my dad was also her real dad, and it was a lot for her to process. Then she said that she was only around at Andrew's last night because his grandma had a fever, and she was trying to help. But then her fever worsened, so she was taken to the hospital. I felt pretty bad about it all, so I tried calling Andrew again to sort all this mess out, but he'd blocked my number. I transferred him some money over towards his grandma's expenses, but he sent it straight back to me. It was so hard being so far away from Andrew and not being able to go and talk things through with him. I missed him like crazy. Because of this, I confided in Kath loads, and she kept me in the loop about how Andrew's grandma was. Apparently, she wasn't well at all. Then, one day, she came up with an idea to help. She told me to send money to her account, and she'd give it to Andrew, and tell him it was from her. Then, when his grandma was better, she'd tell Andrew the truth about where the money came from, and he was sure to realize how much I cared for him and forgive me. I thought this was a great idea, so I sent Kath the money. Then things got weird. She went super quiet and then stopped talking to me altogether. Then 2 months later, through social media, I found out that Andrew was getting married. To Kath! What? After having a screaming frenzy, I calmed down enough to book a flight home. I took an Uber to Andrew's house and pounded on his door. He answered, and on seeing me, he slammed the door in my face. I wasn't leaving until he spoke to me, so I sat on his doorstep. It was only when it started to rain that he eventually opened the door, and in a gruff tone said, "Okay, you have 2 minutes. Then I want you off my property for good." Look, I know you're mad, and I'm sorry, but why are you ignoring me? I tried to make amends for what I did. I sent you the money. I know. I sent it straight back, remember? He grunted. Not that money. The money that Kath gave to you and said was from me. What? That money was from her, not you. You're jealous. You found out I was marrying her, and you're here to ruin our lives. No, I'm not. Please, it was me. I wanted to help. I pleaded, but he tutted, then slammed the door again. I stood there, a soggy mess, and his words sunk in. Kath had lied to Andrew about the money. Why would she do that? Furious, I stormed around to her house and was about to press the buzzer down until she answered when the door opened, and I saw Kath stepping out with Andrew's mom. I jumped out of sight and listened. Andrew's mom was thanking her for all her help and saying how much she couldn't wait for her to be her daughter-in-law. What? As soon as his mom walked off, I jumped out of hiding and confronted Kath. You're a liar! Kath was surprised seeing me, but then she just shrugged and said, whatever, then walked toward her door. He's my man now, not yours, she added, looking back at me. You traitor! I screamed at her as I charged towards her. We got into a fight, and there was a lot of hair pulling. Finally, Kath managed to get through her entrance door and lock me out. She grinned at me through the window, so I shouted at her, Kath, you just wait! You won't get away with this! A few days passed, and their wedding day arrived. It was in some super swanky golf resort. I tried sneaking in through the entrance, but 2 guards stopped me. Ugh! Kath must have pre-warned them about me. So I had to find another way in, which involved climbing through a tiny gap in the hedge. A bodycon dress wasn't my best choice, and I had twigs in my hair and grass stains all over me. Still, out of breath, I showed up at the aisle and waved the evidence of bank statements and messages between me and Kath in Andrew's face, and shouted, Look! This is all the proof you need to show that I sent the money to Kath to help your grandma, and she's a filthy liar! Andrew looked shocked, but he took the evidence from me. No, she's making it up! Kath's eyes widened in alarm as she tried to grab the evidence out of Andrew's hands. Seeing her reaction, he pulled it away from her and looked through it, his face falling when he discovered the truth. How could you lie to me about this? He stared at her. You told me that Jess cut all contact with you. Teary-eyed, Kath glared at me and said, You get everything! The nice clothes and the lavish lifestyle, yet you act like a spoiled brat. I was sick of hiding in your shadow and defending you for all your childish outbursts. I liked Andrew from the beginning, but no, you had to have him. Through gritted teeth, Andrew told her, It's over, Kath. I never want to see you ever again. After that, she rushed up the aisle in a frenzy of white fabric and sobs. Geez, talk about making an exit. That was 3 months ago, and a lot has changed since then. My dad eventually managed to persuade Mum to forgive him, although he had to buy her a new car and take her on a month-long island getaway. Also, she insisted that she never wanted to see Kath or her mom ever again, so Dad arranged for them to move to another city. This worked for me, as I never wanted to see Kath again either. I know I have a short temper, and I overreact sometimes, but I honestly believed that Kath was my friend. It hurt knowing that she didn't care about me at all. She just wanted my life. As for Andrew and me, now we're back together. And there's no way I'm letting my short temper cause me to lose him again. All of this could have been avoided if I hadn't let my anger blindside me. I should have trusted him from the start and heard him out. So now, if I feel anger overtaking my thoughts, I will go and pace the yard first to calm down. I may look like a crazy person, but it works a treat.
This just in. Due to the new wave of COVID-19, the authorities are imposing a nationwide lockdown, which is expected to last 2 weeks. The lockdown will begin at midnight.
Oh no, I have to get back to my dorm. We shouldn't waste any more time talking about this jerk anyway. I grabbed my stuff in a rush. Then suddenly, the doorbell rang.
I'll be back in 1 second.
Steven went to answer the door, while I had no choice but to wait for him. Gosh, this whole pandemic situation was so worrying, and I was already not in the mood for any more bad news. From the living room, I could hear the voice of whoever was standing outside the door.
Hey, any chance I can crash here for a bit? Sure, but just get your life together soon, will you?
Gabe? Gabe turned to look at me. His eyes widened when he realized who I was, and he awkwardly looked away from me.
So you two know each other?
Stephen looked at us confused. There was an awkward silence between us three before he continued.
So, Janet, this is Gabe. He's my friend from the college hockey team. Gabe, this is Janet, my good friend from high school.
Jeez, this had reached new levels of uncomfortable. Gabe cleared his throat. Ahem. So, where do I sleep, Stevie? Then he headed straight to the bedroom that Stephen pointed to while yawning, saying he's going to sleep first. Stephen laughed and turned to me, saying,
He's always like that. We were quite close back in college. He comes and sleeps over sometimes.
I stuttered out. Stephen, that's the guy I was just telling you about. The one that ghosted me. Stephen gave me this astonished look, but he didn't say anything. Ugh, I so wasn't in the mood for this. I think it's best if I go. And right when I thought it couldn't get any worse, a phone call came. Upon seeing me pretty much freaking out as I took the call, Stephen must have sensed something was wrong. He asked me as soon as I was off the phone,
Is everything okay?
It's my roomie. She just told me there's been a positive case in our dorm. I can't go back until quarantine is over. Oh no, what am I supposed to do? All my stuff is in my dorm room, and I can't drive all the way back to my hometown. It's like forever, and it's late already. I wouldn't make it anywhere before the lockdown, and staying in some hotels for 2 weeks was surely not a smart choice.
Janet, you can stay here.
Stephen gently smiled at me.
Don't worry, I'll take care of everything. I can prepare the couch for you, so you don't have to go sleep in my bedroom.
Aw, he remembers I have slight claustrophobia and feel uncomfortable in small rooms. I was about to reply, but he stopped me, then immediately walked over to the couch and started rearranging it. This was cute, and I did feel touched. Guess I'm staying here for quarantine. I mean, this would be fine, but Gabe was here too. What a small world, and what an awkward situation I'm in. But what choice do I have? The first night, Stephen stayed in the living room with me, and we talked a lot.
Do you ever wish we were still back in high school? Things seemed simpler then, didn't they?
Sometimes. It helped that back then I had the sweetest boyfriend. Do you remember when you got the cheerleading team to perform a special routine for my birthday? That's the cutest thing anyone's ever done for me. Stephen grinned.
Well, I tried. We were so happy back then. Then college got in the way.
Hey, it's not all bad. We're still great friends. Stephen smiled back gently.
Very true.
It felt good taking a trip down memory lane with Stephen. He used to be a sweet and caring boyfriend, and he still was such a guy. No matter what, being around him made me feel safe. We continued talking until dawn, then fell asleep. Much later in the morning, I woke up to the sounds of the fridge door slamming. Through blurred eyes, I made out that it was Gabe. He glared over at me before he stormed off back to his room. Ugh! Why did he hate me so much? Then I saw that he'd left pancakes on the table. Oh, these must be for Stephen, so I took them over to him. He was eating them as Gabe reappeared.
Hey Gabe, thanks for the pancakes.
Gabe grunted out a, yeah, then gave me a dirty look before he walked off again. I tried my best to avoid Gabe, but this wasn't easy when I was stuck in a small apartment with him. I spent most of my time reading a book or listening to music. Yeah, we had history, which I just finished telling Stephen the moment before Gabe rang the doorbell. We dated for a month. Everything was cool, and I started to like him a lot. And whoosh, he disappeared. Janet ghosted. I was still very sad and didn't want to deal with any of this yet. Did the universe set up this surreal quarantine situation so I could get over this being ghosted thing? Then after that, when Stephen was in the shower, Gabe walked over to me and passed me a candy bar. I put my book down and took it from him, but only because I didn't want to be rude. Then he awkwardly perched on the edge of the couch and said,
What's the deal with you and Steven? This annoyed me, so I blurted out, "It's none of your business." "Oh, please. I could already tell there's something going on the moment I walked in." Then, before I could reply, he continued, "Fine by me. Makes sense for a girl like you would fall for a playboy." Steven is a good guy. He let you stay here, didn't he? So maybe you should think twice before you badmouth him in the future. Gabe grabbed the candy bar off me, then stood up. His cheeks were puffed out with anger, and he looked like he was gonna explode. That's when Steven appeared and tried to defuse the situation. He led Gabe out of the room, but after that, I was too mad to read, so I sat there overthinking things and feeling even more annoyed than ever. Dinner was awkward. We all sat around the table in deadly silence, and Gabe and I avoided making eye contact. I felt bad that Steven was stuck in the middle of this situation. He didn't deserve this. As I was washing up, I overheard Gabe say to Steven, "Can you give us some space? I need to talk to Janet in private." Steven went off to his bedroom. Then Gabe waited till I'd finished, then asked me to go out to the balcony with him. "Look, Janet, you're smart, beautiful, and very independent. I fell for you right on the first date." Ugh, right. Good luck fooling me one more time. I'm so over it. Seeing that I wasn't taking him seriously, Gabe continued, "I really mean it. That's why you're totally out of my league. I was too cowardly to tell you this, so I decided it'd be best to just disappear and let you forget about me." What? Was he being real? I had no idea he thought that way. He apologized for what he did, and I told him I forgave him. Okay, so maybe Gabe wasn't so bad after all. He's just really insecure. This sucks, as we got on so well. After our conversation, I felt less awkward around Gabe. He started doing cute things for me, such as leaving snacks with a little sticky note that had some cute doodles on it on my pillow, bringing me juices, and showing me funny memes on his phone. I mean, this didn't make up for what he did, but we were confined in a small space together, so politeness doesn't hurt, right? But then Steven started being weird. Whenever Gabe did anything nice, Steven would tut, snort, and on a few occasions, mutter out some rude comments such as, "From ghosting to stalker. Nice." Why was he being like this? Hey, don't tell me that he's jealous of Gabe. Great. Out of the frying pan, into the fire. Then, one lunchtime, Gabe made us French onion soup. As he passed it to me, Steven shook his head and, laughing, said, "That stinks. This is a poor attempt to impress Janet. FYI, she hates onions." "What do you mean? I'm not trying to impress anyone." "Oh, please. I know you still have feelings for Janet, but you're no match for her." I watched them with a poker face, since I couldn't process what was going on. Then Steven turned to me, boldly said, "Janet, so many things have happened and changed, but one thing is still solid. That's my feelings for you. Don't waste your time with this kid." Wow, I sat there perplexed. What was that? And wasn't Steven a little too mean there? This was a side of him I hadn't seen before, and I didn't like it. "Stevie, what is this? I thought we were bros." "Yeah, relax, we are. Look, we both like Janet, so she just needs to decide who she wants. So, who's it gonna be?" OMG, this is just like that Twyla Saga situation. I have to choose between two totally different guys. Ugh, I hate it. Both this situation and that series. And honestly, I don't like the immature way they're acting now. How dare you two create this whole dilemma by yourself and put me in the middle of it? I choose neither of you, okay? You both had a chance with me and you both let me go. I want to stay friends, but that's it. I stormed off, thinking this would be the end of it. Oh, how wrong I was. One time, I was watching a movie alone and got up to go to the bathroom. When I came back, they were both sitting on the couch, arguing with each other about who should stay and sit with me and who should go.
Fed up, I shouted, "Will you both quit it already? You left me for college, and you for your own insecurities. And neither of you is acting like a grown man. I want a boyfriend who I can rely on, and that's definitely neither of you. As far as I'm concerned, any romantic feelings I had toward you both are well and truly in the past." They both gave me stunned looks, and more awkward silence prevailed. Was it a bit harsh on them? Even so, they still needed to know my feelings so they'd stop their own illusions and stop fighting in vain. Luckily, quarantine was almost over, so at least I'll be out of this smothering apartment in 2 days. Oh boy, that was the longest 2 days ever. No one spoke to each other, and the atmosphere was awful. When it finally ended, I muttered out a quick thank you and hurried to the door.
Janet, we are still friends, right?
Yeah, you're still my friend too, yeah? Stephen and Gabe impatiently longed for my reply, but I just smiled at them both and left. The truth is, I'm not sure I want to be friends with either of them anymore. The last 2 weeks were so weird and messed up that I can't think of anything further. So, for now, I'm just gonna enjoy the relief of getting out of that bizarre being stuck with two exes scenario first, right?
My phone beeped with a new message. Emma, I've got something to do nearby, so let's meet there. See ya.
It was from Tony, my childhood friend from the orphanage back in Missouri. Yep, that's right. I ended up in an orphanage after my mom passed away when I was only 4 years old. But things were even worse for Tony and him. They'd been left outside the orphanage door without anyone even knowing who their parents were. And now here I am, on my way to visit his grave, as today's his death anniversary. Time flies. I can hardly believe it's been 10 years already. I picked up some flowers, then drove to the cemetery. Tony was already there waiting for me. I smiled and waved, but my heart felt heavy. Back when we were 14, we'd been joined at the hip, Tony, Thomas, and me. I had a secret crush on Thomas, but I never got the chance to tell him. It had all happened so fast on that day. We were just kids, young and dumb. We'd snuck out to go play by the riverbank. One minute we were splashing each other in the river. The next moment, Thomas was being carried away in the current. I tried to save him, but Tony pulled me back to shore. Even thinking about it now, I still couldn't help but burst into tears.
Don't cry, Em. I'll always be here for you.
And I knew he would be. Deep down, I knew Tony always had feelings for me. But I didn't feel the same way. After that, Tony drove me home. Seeing my exhausted look, he said before I went inside,
Get a good night's sleep, Em. Remember, we've got that interview tomorrow.
Gosh, I almost forgot. Tony probably thought I was the worst employee ever. And yes, you can guess it. Tony is my boss. After years in the orphanage, he was adopted by a super smart family that had inspired him to strive to become someone important, and he'd eventually built a food startup. Anyway, the following morning, despite still feeling worn out, I had no choice but to put on a brave face to go to work, as I had a marketing team to lead. But as I walked into the lobby, a guy bumped into me. He helped me up and frantically apologized, explaining he was in a rush. I looked up and was about to nag him, but wait, why does he look so familiar? In fact, he looked exactly like... It's you! You... I stammered, but I couldn't even finish my sentences because he'd rushed into the lift and the doors had closed. I must have been seeing things. Honestly, throughout the whole interview, I could barely concentrate. Could there be two people looking that similar on this earth? I was lost in thought when the next applicant came in, and it was him. Both Tony and I stared in shock. He was the spitting image of Thomas. But he couldn't be. I mean, Thomas had died years ago. We both were too stunned to say anything until his voice broke the silence.
Hi, I'm Dustin, and I'm here to interview for the marketing position.
I looked at Tony, and he looked just as confused as I did. But, yeah, it wasn't Thomas. This guy was from Illinois and had never even been to Missouri. Okay, so here's Thomas's doppelganger. Fair enough. The interview went well, and even though he was a bit arrogant, he knew what he was doing, so we hired him. When I left the room, surprisingly, Dustin was still waiting for me outside. He offered to treat me to lunch as an apology for earlier. I agreed, as I was desperate to ask him more questions. During lunch, I kept mentioning the orphanage, some of Thomas's hobbies and things he hated, but Dustin didn't even bat an eyelid. I was disappointed, because I really hoped Dustin would actually be Thomas. That night, I barely slept. I couldn't stop thinking about Dustin. It's ridiculous, but I still had a strong feeling that he really was my childhood sweetheart. Suddenly, I got a message from Tony.
Saw you hanging out with Dustin. Wake up, Em. He's not Thomas.
Ugh, I didn't need to hear that. The next day, I couldn't take my eyes off of Dustin. At lunch, I watched as he put honey on his watermelon, and I almost freaked out. That was exactly what Thomas used to do. Oh my, I blurted out. I then told Tony what I just saw as soon as he sat down, but he just laughed and said,
Honestly, Em, tons of people do that. Do you really think that our Thomas could be that arrogant?
Seeing that I was still unfazed, he continued.
But if you still want to check, just give him a peach. Things can change, but allergies don't, right?
OMG, Tony was a genius. He probably was just kidding, but I was super serious. So the next day, I bought Dustin a peach pie to welcome him to the team. But to my surprise, he ate it up with pleasure and seemed totally fine. Okay, clearly I needed to let this go. He wasn't Thomas. End of. But if only things were that simple. And even though I knew Dustin wasn't Thomas, I still felt attracted to him. He was smart and sweet, and so much fun to be around. Eventually, we started hanging out and became very close. We didn't actually make anything official, but we were low-key dating already. However, it was impossible to hide things from Tony. One time, our company went on a team bonding weekend, and we'd arranged a tennis competition. We had to pair up, so obviously I would go with Dustin, but as we're about to go sign up, then Tony came to ask me to be his partner too. My God, it was so awkward. Then Tony said in a very sulky tone,
Okay, how about we have a little competition? The winner gets to pair up with Emma.
And so they had a swimming race. That's so embarrassing. I knew Dustin couldn't swim, so I started to panic, but he got in the pool anyway. Obviously, Tony won, but who cares? He was acting like a child. I rushed over to help Dustin, who was left coughing and choking on the water, and at that moment, I realized that I was falling for him so much. But since then, there were rumors in the company that Dustin was only flirting with me to get promoted. One morning, we were walking through the lobby together when two girls started whispering about us. So Dustin took my hand and went straight to the girls saying,
I love Emma. What's wrong with that? Tell me. Go on.
At that exact moment, Tony appeared and asked if he could have a word with Dustin in his office. I was so nervous. Now everyone knew we were in some weird triangle, and I didn't like it one bit. Then one of my colleagues overheard Tony telling Dustin that if he didn't leave me alone, he'd be fired. I couldn't believe it. I went to find Tony right away, and before I could even confront him, he said,
Yes, it's true. I asked those girls to start the rumors, and I also asked that jerk to give up on you. It was me. I did it all. I just don't get it, Em. Why have I ever been good enough for you?
Tony, wait.
It's been 10 years. Why couldn't you give me a chance? Why can't you let Thomas go? Some guy who looks like him walks up and you totally forget about me? He's a loser compared to Thomas.
Don't you dare call him a loser, I said.
See? In the end, you still care about him only, not me.
Tony shouted, then stormed off. I hated to be in this situation. On the one hand, I truly liked Dustin, but Tony was not only my lifesaver, but also my best friend, who'd stuck by my side through all the highs and lows. What a dilemma. In the end, I decided to have a little space from Dustin, just until things cooled down. Maybe then the rumors would stop and people would quit being so negative about him. But that wasn't to be so. You see, our new product that hadn't even been released yet suddenly appeared on the website of our direct competitor. Someone must have leaked the confidential file. But who? An investigation was opened and all of our computers were checked. You won't believe it, but the IT team had been able to recover a deleted email that had been sent to our rivals from Dustin's outbox. Dustin denied it, and he demanded to check the CCTV. That's how we caught Mike, one of our senior employees, at Dustin's computer sneakily doing something. And to think, he'd put the blame on Dustin. After the truth came out, I went over to Dustin, but he seemed mad as he said,
"You think I'm a jerk too, don't you? That's why you've been giving me the cold shoulder."
I told him I never believed he'd done it. Then I took his hand. "I'm so sorry. It's just that I've been through some stuff." Then we hugged. Oh my, I'd missed him so much. But the drama didn't end there. The info leaked had caused our company huge losses. We had thousands of meetings, and the stress was unreal. Feeling so deflated, I went up to the rooftop to get some air. Suddenly, I heard Dustin's voice somewhere. He was on the phone with someone talking about some plan to steal our company's products. No way! Without even thinking, I charged over and snatched his phone away to see that he was talking to Mike? Oh my God! Had they been accomplices from the beginning? I was so angry, but actually more disappointed. So I asked him to resign and stay away from my sight. I know I should have exposed him to the whole company instead of letting him go that easy, but I guess my heart couldn't bear to do that. I felt so bad, especially towards Tony, the best friend who's always by my side, while I was busy chasing after a jerk. I lost contact with Dustin after that, and I barely had time to think about it because our company was on the brink of bankruptcy. But one day, I got a call from him, followed by a message saying,
"Please don't ignore me. I've got something important to tell you."
So we met up the next day at a coffee shop, and as soon as I saw him, I said, "Look, Dustin, I've had enough of your lies. Please just get to the point." Then he replied,
"Emma, I admit that I only came to work for your company to steal your ideas. But seeing you and Tony after all these years, and falling for you all over again, well, that wasn't part of my plan."
I was confused. After all these years? What are you talking about? Then he showed me his wrist, and he was wearing a friendship bracelet.
"Remember this? You gave it to me on my birthday 10 years ago."
OMG. What was going on? I couldn't believe my eyes. I'd given this to Thomas. But then why? But the peach. I continued. He just laughed and said,
"I overheard you guys' plan, so I made sure to take allergy meds just before."
Then he went on to explain that he was Thomas, and that he'd been lucky enough to be saved that day on the river. There was a family who were out in the river searching for their drowned son, but instead of finding him, they found Thomas, and so they kindly adopted him and changed his name to their son's, Dustin. This was insane. Here was Thomas right in front of me, after all these years. And guess what? His adoptive father is the director of our rival company, and so he'd asked Dustin, or should I say Thomas, to come and infiltrate our company. Thomas kept apologizing for it, saying how much it had tormented him, and that he just missed me and had to tell me the truth. My head was spinning. This was all too much. I needed a moment to think it all through. But in the end, we decided that he could help our company by uploading a post to expose the truth. Obviously, as soon as Tony heard about it all, he was furious. He was mostly mad at me because I'd covered for Thomas. He'd even stopped talking to me for a while. But putting that aside, after Thomas's post, things got better for our company. We were able to launch new products as scheduled, and he even contributed some capital to help with our new project. Now our companies are still rivals, but at least it's now a fair competition. As for Tony and I, we eventually made up. He came to find me one day after work and said,
I'm so sorry for how childish I've been. I was just jealous of you and Thomas. I was too selfish to consider your feelings. But you and Thomas, I want you guys to be together. You two are made for each other."
I couldn't stop crying as he said that. It meant so much to me. And guess what? It has now been a whole year since Thomas came back into our lives, and the three of us are back to being the best of friends. Oh, and I should probably add that Thomas and I are engaged. We're so happy, and we're even opening an orphanage together for homeless kids like us. I'm going through many phases, but I finally found peace in life. I guess it all worked out after all. These need to be washed by hand. Kelly threw a pile of clothes on the floor. And be quick about it! Hey, I'm Maya, and that bossy girl is Kelly. Although we live in the same house, we aren't siblings. You see, when I was just a baby, I was adopted by a loving old couple. They lived on a farm in the countryside. Their kids had grown up and left home, and they were both missing the lively energy that only a child could bring. One Sunday at church, they saw the priest raising a baby girl and offered to help. So that's how they ended up taking me home and bringing me up as their grandchild. They were the nicest people, and they showered me in nothing but love and kindness. I'm always more than grateful for them. We lived together happily until one day, when Grandpa was in the orchard, he collapsed. Sadly, he passed away. Grandma was never the same after that. She'd lost her soulmate. Her health also deteriorated, and then one night she called me into her room, and gripping my hand, she said, "Sweetie, you brought so much joy into our lives. Without us, life could be tough. But don't worry, we're always with you. When I'm gone, go find my old purse hidden in the broken tractor in the back barn. We've saved up a little bit for you. Our little Maya have to live your best life. All right?" Then, before I could ask her any more about this, she closed her eyes, and just like that, she'd left me forever. I stayed with her for hours, crying my heart out. Afterward, following Grandma's words, I went in search of the money. Oh, God! I gasped in shock as I opened the purse. There was at least $20,000 here. How did my grandparents manage to save up such an amount of money? I knew they were thrifty, but this was way too much. After that, I moved to Columbus to live with my grandparents' daughter, Mrs. Madison, and her daughter, Kelly. So you're wondering what I did with the money, right? Well, I keep it hidden here, in this crack in the roof. Oh, someone's coming. Your room is disgusting. Anyway, Kelly and I are going out, so make sure you clean everywhere before we get back. I expect it to be spotless. I gave a weak nod and watched her totter away. This wasn't a new occurrence. Every day, they'd mess up the house, then force me to clean it. I know, I was basically the real-life Cinderella. But it's okay. As soon as I turned 18, I'm gonna leave this place anyway and start living my own life with my money. The next morning, it was raining, so I tried to walk to school as fast as possible, when suddenly, Kelly drove past me and deliberately sped through this big puddle. Mud splattered all over me. Jeez, why is torturing me her favorite hobby? My shirt was filthy, and as I walked toward my locker, some girls laughed at me. One even sneered. The dirty look must be trendy in the countryside, but here it just looks tragic. Yeah, I've been in the city for almost a year now, but I still couldn't fit in. Maybe it's because I always wear the same worn-out clothes and borrow all my books from the library. Mrs. Madison refused to buy me anything new, and I couldn't use my own money, as that would look suspicious. I couldn't even afford to go on the school picnic. I'd never be one of them. Then, during recess, the class monitor Josie informed everyone that prom was happening soon, and the dress code was formal. While all the other kids squealed and clapped excitedly, I lowered my head and sighed. I had nothing to wear to prom. Maya? Hearing my name broke me from my thoughts, and I realized it was Josie, and standing around her were some of the nice girls from class. You have to come to prom this time, please. You've never joined us in any other activities before. Don't worry, we will help you look spectacular. I gave an awkward smile and replied, Thanks, guys, but I can't expect you to do that. They all insisted that I should go, but I remained adamant that it wasn't my kind of thing. Then came Meanie Kelly. Maya isn't suitable for this type of event. How dare she say that? I mean, just because I wasn't a spoiled princess didn't mean I wasn't suitable to attend. So I turned to Josie and smiled. Actually, that sounds fun. I will go to the prom. That evening at dinner, I mentioned the prom to Mrs. Madison and suggested that it could be a reward in exchange for doing all the housework. She coldly replied, You live under my roof rent-free, and now you expect me to do housework for you too? Or what, Your Majesty? Then she turned to Kelly, smiled and asked, Darling, have you decided on a prom dress yet? Then Kelly showed her mom pictures of gorgeous dresses on her phone while throwing smirks at me. Ugh! I couldn't sit around looking at Kelly's smug face anymore. This time, I definitely had to go to prom and be prettier than her. So that weekend, I went thrift store shopping with Josie, and after looking in about a dozen stores, Josie lifted up this really pretty blue gown. It had a tear down the side, but I knew I could easily sew that up and thrift flip it a little. I'd seen people do that on YouTube. The night of the prom, Josie did my hair and makeup, and I showed up in the dress. I felt like a real-life princess, and everyone was looking at me and giving me compliments, while Kelly stood there with her arms folded and a sulky look on her face. Then this boy called David walked over to me and started talking. Turns out, he was the new senior here. All the girls had their eyes on him, including Kelly, who walked over and tried offering him a drink, but he snubbed her and continued talking to me, leaving her standing there in silent anger before storming out of the prom. I had such a wonderful night with my new friends. I arrived home in a great mood and was happily singing to myself. But this instantly changed when I saw Kelly sitting there waiting for me. Such a thief! Now, don't tell me this fancy dress just fell down on you from the sky! Kelly shouted at me. I insisted that I hadn't stolen anything, so she dragged Mrs. Madison to the living room and asked her to check if she had lost any money recently. Mrs. Madison said no without thinking at first, but when she read Kelly's face, she started to fake complaining about some $100 bills missing from her purse, and the two started to jump on me. Ugh! Unbelievable! I ran up to my room and tried to shake away the negative thoughts and think back to how happy I was at prom. Then, as usual, I checked my hiding spot. Huh? What was that noise? I looked towards the stairs, but no one was there. It was probably just the house creaking or something. The next day at school was amazing, as loads of kids stopped and talked to me. Then, when I got home, I went up to my room and double-checked my hiding spot. My heart plummeted in my chest. The purse! It had gone! I frantically searched for it. Then I remembered hearing something last night, and there were only 3 of us in this house. Could it be? Furious, I ran into the living room where Mrs. Madison and Kelly were watching TV. I shouted at them, My money! I want it back right now! In an unconcerned tone, Mrs. Madison replied, What money? What are you talking about? Oh, I see. So you have your own money all along, and have been keeping it for yourself? Poof! What an ungrateful brat! Mom lets you live here even though you aren't actually family, and now you're accusing us of stealing? I knew they'd taken my money, but what could I do about it? I had no choice but to go back to my room and cried, as I looked at old photos of me with my grandparents. The next day at school, I really wasn't in the mood for lessons. During recess, I was just staring out of the window in despair when I heard a cough, so I looked and saw David there.
Hey, Maya.
He smiled at me.
Are you okay? You seem kinda down.
I'm fine. I gathered up my stuff and left. I know he was only being nice, but I wasn't feeling like small-talking right now. Then, after school, Kelly made me carry her heavy backpack home. I had no energy left to argue, so I glumly did as she asked. That's when David drove up alongside me and asked,
Hey, that looks heavy. Do you need a lift?
I nodded and got into his car while forcing a smile to thank him. He asked,
Maya, what's up? You can talk to me, you know. I'm a good listener. Promise.
He's so sweet, and I instantly felt safe around him. We chatted a lot and started hanging out more and more after that. We took walks through the park and had lunch together. I found myself growing closer to him, but not in the way you might think. No, more like a brother. Then, a few weeks later, when Mrs. Madison made me clean up the mess in the house that she'd made again, I found something under her bed. The old purse that Grandma had left me. And the money was all gone! I stormed downstairs and slammed the purse onto the kitchen table. But Mrs. Madison shrugged.
It was my mother's purse. Therefore, that money belongs to me. You obviously stole it from my poor elderly parents.
Kelly backed up her mom with her annoying tone. Wow, how low do you have to be to con a sick old lady into giving you her life savings? Grandma left it for me, not you! You two are monsters! I screamed at them, took the purse and went up to my room. I started to pack, then I was leaving here once and for all. Only, when I went to try the door, I couldn't open it. OMG, they'd locked me in! Worse still, in all the drama, I'd left my phone downstairs, so I couldn't even call David for help. The next day, Mrs. Madison let me out, but only on the condition that I did all the housework, and from now on, I wasn't allowed to go to school or anything like that. And if I broke this rule, she'd make sure I ended up in trouble for stealing the money. So, it is what it is. I had no choice. They've got me on a string. One afternoon, I was out front watering the flowers when Mrs. Madison shouted out from the living room.
No! Not the roses! Water the ones over there! You useless girl!
Then suddenly, I felt someone yank my arm. It's David. He was worried about my absence, so he came to check on me.
Maya, there's someone I want you to meet.
Then he signaled me to follow him. I had no idea where David was taking me, but anything would be a way better option than listening to any more of Mrs. Harrison's nagging, so I got in his car. He took me to his house, and there was this man in there. I suppose it's David's dad, but then, with tear-filled eyes, the man blurted out,
Maya, it's you, my daughter. You're finally home.
Huh? What? So, after I sat down and had a sip of water to brace myself for whatever was about to come, the two told me about how when I was a baby, my mom got sick and passed away. My dad struggled to look after me and my brother, so he gave me to a priest. Eventually, my dad managed to turn his life around, and knowing that I'd been adopted by the elderly couple, he started sending money to them to help them raise me. Then, when he came to find me, I wasn't there anymore. He found out that I was living with the daughter of an elderly couple in Columbus, so he moved to this city with the hope of finding me. It was such a coincidence that David ended up attending the same school as me. David said that the first time he saw me, he felt this strange bond right away, and how amazing that this gut feeling was right, as it soon became clear I was his long-lost sister. Wow, this was a lot to take in, but it was the greatest news ever! I left Mrs. Madison's house after that, of course, and moved in with my dad and brother. And for the first time since I'd lost my grandparents, I found myself feeling truly happy again. Now, you're probably wondering what became of Mrs. Madison and Kelly. Well, I was walking past their house the other day and saw a for sale sign in the yard. Turns out, Mrs. Madison had been spending money like water and now was in debt, so she was having to sell the house. I don't want to gloat or anything, but I guess that's karma for them. Bye, Auntie. I waved to her. I promise I'll be fine at home alone. That's good. I'll be back soon, Bee. Then she left. That's my Auntie Anna. I was staying with her while my parents were on vacation. I was about to walk back into the living room when the doorbell rang, so I immediately ran to the door and looked through the peephole. Ah! It was Mom! I quickly opened the door and rushed out to hug her tightly. Mommy! How come you're back so early? Mom stroked my hair and softly said,
Oh, sweetie, I came to pick you up. How can I leave my little princess alone? Now, hurry up and pack your things.
I gave a confused look. But Auntie Anna's at the grocery store. Shouldn't we wait for her? She shook her head.
No, sweetie. I already called her.
So we quickly packed my things, and Mom led me outside to a rather old car, which was completely different from our usual BMW. Mom, where's Dad? This isn't our car, I asked her. She knelt in front of me and smiling said,
Daddy's waiting for us at the beach. It's going to be lots of fun.
I jumped up and down excitedly. Yay! I couldn't wait to build sandcastles and splash in the sea. This was so cool. On the way, I must have fallen asleep, as when I opened my eyes, it was already dark outside. I got out of the car and looked around. Where was the ocean? All I saw was some small house in an unfamiliar neighborhood.
Beatrice, this is our new home. Just you and me from now on.
Mom's sudden words totally woke me up. Mom, why? What about Dad? I stammered.
Listen, I'm sorry. I can't explain it to you at the moment. You're too young to understand.
I had so many questions flying around my head, but looking at Mom's sad face, I knew I shouldn't ask her anymore. The next morning, I woke up excited and curious about our new beginning here. I opened the curtain and saw a group of kids my age playing across the street. So, without thinking, I rushed outside to join them. Hello, I'm Beach. Suddenly, my mom came out of nowhere, a frantic look on her face as she shouted,
I've told you to stay inside!
And pulled me back home. Everyone was gawping at us, including the man who lived across the street. It was so embarrassing. As soon as the door slammed shut, in a serious tone, she said,
We just moved here. You shouldn't make friends with strangers that fast. And don't talk too much about yourself, okay?
Mom had never minded me playing with other kids before, so why now? This didn't make any sense. After that, she only let me out of the house for school, and she always kept an eye on me, so that's why I couldn't make any friends here. I resented her so much. I was so lonely. One good thing about it was she didn't have any house rules, so I could spend all day watching cartoons while eating junk food, and she didn't mind at all. This was great, as before we moved here, Mom and Dad never let me do stuff like this. But eventually, I got sick of those junk foods. I felt kinda icky. I longed for Mom's special spaghetti with crab sauce, so I begged her to make it. At first, she refused, saying that she was very busy, so I kept on whining until she finally agreed. Later, I went to the kitchen for dinner, and the room was an utter chaos. Pots and pans everywhere. Mom looked messy too, as she passed me a plate of spaghetti and meatballs instead of her signature dish. Well, okay, it looked delicious anyway, so I took a full fork of it as Mom watched on. Water! I need water! Gosh, it's so salty. Mom quickly replaced my pasta plate with a box of fried chicken and said,
Today I'm busy, so I was a bit distracted. Sorry, honey.
Her awkwardness made me laugh. Nah, it's okay, Mom. Mom did seem really busy lately, as her phone was always buzzing. The calls even came late at night when I was asleep, so she always quietly went out to answer it. Guess it's hard being a single mom after all, so I tried to be more understanding. And just like that, time passed. Staying inside and having no friends became the norm for me. Still, I often sat by the window and stared longingly at the kids playing outside. Then one time, when I was doing this, Mom appeared and asked me if I wanted to go to the nearby amusement park. Wow, could there be anything better than this? I leaped up, clapped excitedly, then wrapped my arms around her. Honestly, the park was pretty small, and everything seemed kinda tired looking. But this didn't matter, as it was the best day I'd ever had. Mom never used to like rides or games, but today was different. She even got excited when she saw the beanbag throwing stall. She knocked the tins down in one go and won me this giant cuddly bunny. I've never seen her have fun like this before. My mom is so cool. Afterward, Mom left me sitting on a bench and she went off to get some ice cream. Suddenly, I saw her rushing back, and without ice creams. She pulled on my hand and in an urgent tone said, "We need to go home. We're moving." So we packed up our things and left in a rush. I kept on asking Mom what was going on, but she dodged my questions. During the car journey, I heard her mutter to herself, "We're going somewhere new. It'll be exciting. A new adventure. Yes, it'll be fine this time." I may have been young, but I wasn't stupid. I knew she was hiding something. But she's my mom, and I didn't want to upset her by bugging her with questions. So I stayed quiet and eventually fell asleep. Once again, I woke up in an unfamiliar place and stared out of the window. I wasn't as bothered about this place as I was about the last. I didn't want to get too attached to it, as I didn't know how long it'd be before Mom made us move again. But there was one thing that bothered me. Across the street was a man looking straight at our new house. He looked identical to our previous neighbor. Maybe he'd just moved here too? What a coincidence! I mentioned the man to Mom, but she told me she didn't know him, and then sternly told me never to interact with him. At school, I was the strange kid who didn't talk to anyone. The older I got, the worse this felt. And the other kids laughed at me, and I heard them call me weird behind my back. I felt so lonely and depressed. So at home, I often just sat by the window with a book and tried to pretend that the adventures I was reading about were happening to me. Worse still, Mom was acting even odder than usual. The other day when I got home from school, I found her chucking perfectly good food out of the fridge. Some were even brand new. I asked her what she was doing, and she replied, "It's gone off, so I'm getting rid of it." Then she started scrubbing the fridge. "The smell won't go. Why won't it go?" What was she talking about? Everything seemed fine. What's happening? Then I discovered that Mom often left the house late at night and didn't return till dawn. I knew if I asked her about this, she wouldn't say anything. So that night, I snuck out and followed her. Mom was wearing dark clothes with a hat and a big scarf covering her face, even though it's not that cold outside. Why the disguise? Then, can you believe it? I spotted her going over to the neighbor's house and cuddling him on his porch. I jumped out of the darkness and shouted, "Mom, what's going on? I thought we weren't meant to talk to this man." She gave me an alarmed look. At that moment, Mom received a text. In a panicked voice, she said to me, "Beatrice, we have to go. Now! I'll explain everything later, I promise." Right after that, the mysterious man waved at us and told us to get in his car. Then he sped through the night. After regaining my senses, I turned to my mom and asked, "I hope this explanation is good." Actually, we're in danger, honey. It's your dad. He's an imposter. I only figured this out when I was on vacation with him, and I've been running from him ever since." What? I'd never suspected my dad of being someone else. It made no sense. Then, through sobs, my mom continued to say that my real dad was actually a member of a secret organization, but he had been missing for a while, and now the organization was after us. She often received anonymous messages and calls threatening her. She didn't want me talking to strangers in case they were spies. And those times when she threw all the food out was because she'd received texts threatening to poison the food in our house. She wiped her tears away, then said, "This is Joe. We went to college together and he's been such a help. We fell in love, but I didn't dare tell you because I was afraid you wouldn't understand." I looked at this Joe guy. I don't know. There was something off about him, but maybe I was just being paranoid. I mean, he had helped Mom out, right? Ah! What's that? Ever since I found out about the secret organization, I've been kinda jittery. What if they suddenly turn up and take me and my mom away? I know Mom's worried too, as she seems so distant. I just want to make things better for us both. Then Christmas arrived. It was quite the special one, as for the first time since we went into hiding, we had guests. Well, one guest, Joe. We raised our glasses for a Merry Christmas, but instead of putting it down, my mom gulped it back in one go. "Mom, are you drinking tonight?" I asked skeptically. "Of course, my dear. It's Christmas. Let me tell you, I'm no less than a man when it comes to drinking." I chewed on my lip as I thought about this. Mom had an alcohol allergy, and at the most, she only had tiny sips. Suddenly, a thought came to mind. Maybe Dad wasn't the imposter after all. Maybe it had been Mom all along. She enjoyed the roller coaster rides, though to my recollection, Mom was afraid of heights. She couldn't cook. She now loved Joe, a strange man, and she could have downed alcohol without being ill. If this was true, then who could I trust now? Something wasn't right. I could feel it in my gut. So the next day, I secretly went to the cops instead of school as usual. Then I found out something crazy. Turns out, my real parents had been looking for me for over the past 6 years. OMG! As for the mother I was living with, who was she? I tried to stay calm while waiting for the police to contact my parents first. And as soon as they got there, the three of us broke down in tears. That's when my real mom told the whole truth. Actually, she had a twin sister called Linda. No one had ever known about Linda, as due to her debt problems, my grandpa rejected her and forbade her to ever show up in front of anyone in the family. But my mom couldn't disown her own twin, so she secretly gave her money. Then one time, Linda was asking for too much that Mom turned her down. Unexpectedly, she came and took me away to pressure my mom to send her more money. During that time, my mom kept transferring her money to make sure I'd be provided for. She hadn't given any information about Linda to the cops, though, because Mom still wanted to talk to her first, though, so that her sister wouldn't end up in trouble. Wow, this was a lot to take in. After that, Mom ran over to Dad, who's in line to talk to the police. She grabbed his hand and begged him to give Auntie Linda a chance. As you see, I missed out on having a normal childhood because of my aunt, and what she did was wrong. But there's a part of me that will always care for her, as she raised me for all these years. And my heart urged me to say, "Dad, I didn't want to turn her in either." My dad looked at me hesitantly, but in the end, he nodded in agreement. So we decided to deal with it ourselves without the intervention of the police. Then, the next day as planned, I was in the front yard with my fake mom when her identical twin marched up to our house and confronted her. Once my Auntie Linda got over the initial shock, she confessed everything to me. It was sad, but glad that it's all over now. Mom paid off her sister's debts with one condition, that she would never, ever get near me again. Now I'm back home, with my actual parents. It's going to take some getting used to, as I've forgotten how to make friends. And going outside alone makes me nervous. Looks like the memories of the adventure with my uninvited Aunt Linda might follow me for quite some more time. I know I have to try and move forward. I can't get back the past 6 years, but I can do my best to try and embrace the future. Did you hear anything I just said? Oh gosh, sorry. And, no. I swear, I wasn't ignoring my friend on purpose. I was just distracted by that guy over there. Luca. I know. He's so handsome. The best part is, he's single. Yep, he broke up with his girlfriend a few months ago. And today was the day I, Michelle Summer, would make Luca Rodriguez my boyfriend. I mean, his heart had to have healed by now, right? The only class I shared with Luca was French, so it was now or never. I wrote a love letter and asked the guy behind me to pass it to Luca. My heart started beating faster and faster until my teacher, Mrs. Davis, intercepted it. Who's passing letters in class? Nobody, huh? Let's see what's so important it can't wait until break. Wait, was she seriously gonna read it in front of the whole class? I watched her slowly open the letter. Oh man, someone sweep in and stop her, please! Dear Luca, I was struck by the lightning of love right from the first time I saw you. I can't stop thinking about your cute smile and how I could drown in your deep blue eyes. I like you, and I was wondering if you like me too. The whole class burst out laughing, but luckily for me, Mrs. Davis left my name out. Phew. I glanced over at Luca. He looked so embarrassed. What a massive fail! As I waited for the bus, I felt kind of down about everything. Then it began to rain. Great! And to top it off, suddenly a car passed by and splashed me. I was literally wet from head to toes. I shouted out in anger. Are you kidding me? The car suddenly reversed, then stopped alongside me. I held my breath as the car window opened. Huh? Luca! What? I'm really sorry. Are you okay? OMG. Luca was speaking to me. Okay, calm down, Michelle. Just play it cool. Oh, I'm fine. It was my fault. I shouldn't have sat at the bus station. Yeah, right. How smooth. Perfect. Now he'd think I was a weirdo and drive away. But he didn't. Instead, he smiled and said, Get in. I'll give you a ride home. Me and Luca? Alone in a car? Thank you, universe. I excitedly got in. Oh, there were two other people in the back seat. He introduced them as his friends, Wesley and Aubrey. Aw, that was so nice of him to give us all a ride. While his two friends were listening to music in the back seat, I got to talk to Luca. That's when I found out that we had so much more in common than I ever expected. He's a big fan of DC Comics, and his favorite series were Arrow and The Flash. Just like me! Oh, how I wished this ride would never reach my house. That night, I couldn't do anything but lay in bed daydreaming about how unreal this whole thing was when my phone beeped. Holy Mother of God. Can anyone please hold my hand? Luca had texted me. Hey, Michelle. Sorry again for soaking you. I had fun talking to you. Was I dreaming? I pinched myself to check. Ouch. Nope. It was vividly real. Then one thing led to another. We chatted till late that night, and it repeated on the day after. And the day after, we basically talked every night. And then something wonderful happened. He asked me out on a date. Yes, you heard me right. A date! Eek! And the best part, he wanted to watch a horror movie. Everyone knows a guy only suggests this so the girl will hug him when she's scared. Okay, Luca. I like your way of thinking. He chose The Conjuring 3, so I had to binge watch part 1 and 2 in one night. It was so terrifying, but I was willing to do anything for Luca. D-Day arrived, and I spent hours picking out the cutest outfit. But then I arrived at the movie theater to see that Wesley and Aubrey were there too. Seeing my surprised look, Luca said, Oh, I invited Wesley and Aubrey. It's gonna be a fun double date. Did he just say double date? Aw, so it's still a date. What a relief. He didn't mention to me before that Wesley and Aubrey were a couple. Phew. all the jump scares in the movie did get me to constantly hold onto Luca's arm. You'd think I'd be happy about this, right? But no, I wasn't. Why? Because I wasn't the only girl holding his arm. Aubrey was too. No, I'm not kidding. Hello? Wasn't her boyfriend also sitting next to her? Thank God the movie finally ended, as watching Aubrey clinging onto Luca was even creepier than the movie. After that, Luca suggested we go for Mexican food. I happily agreed. Only Wes and Aubrey tagged along too, of course. Then just before we ordered drinks, Wes received a call from his mom and had to leave. So the three of us were left having dinner together. It was an awkward atmosphere, as Aubrey kept bringing up all these inside jokes with Luca, while I sat there clueless and feeling like a third wheel. Well, that sucked, but at least I'll have some time alone with him on the ride home to make up for this, right? But then Aubrey latched onto his arm and in her sickly sweet voice asked, "Oh, it's so late out. Luca, you're driving me home, aren't you?" Luca turned to look at me awkwardly. Well, I didn't want to make a scene, so I said, "Don't worry, I can call my friend. She works right around the corner and her shift's about to end." Yep, that was a big fat lie. Anyway, he smiled, and then they left, leaving me there all alone. I called an Uber and headed home. That night, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't stop thinking about how there was something fishy about their relationship. But then I got a text from Luca. "I had a great time today. I was wondering if you'd like to be my girlfriend? X." What? I had to rub my eyes and reread it. OMG. It really said girlfriend in the text. So that means Luca and Aubrey are just really close friends. That's all. I smiled while replying yes to him. So from that moment on, we became an official couple. It was awesome. Well, except for one same old problem. He always brought his friends along. Every day. You see, Wesley and Aubrey went to another high school nearby. When I first met them, I thought Luca was just giving them a ride home because of the rain. But turns out, he drove them every freaking day. They often hang out afterwards also. So it meant that Luca and I never had alone time, not even half an hour. But that wasn't the worst part. Since Luca and I became official, Aubrey's become even bolder than before. For instance, one time at the park, Luca was eating a hot dog and got some mustard on his face. I laughed so hard and told him to stay still so I could take a picture of his cute face. But then Aubrey just turned to him, took out a tissue, and wiped the mustard away. And that wasn't all. She even drank from his cup, fed him snacks, and often gave him these googly eyes. You must be wondering how she could just blatantly flirt in front of Wes like that? Well, that girl really knew how to blindside him. Sometimes she kissed him on the cheek or stroked his hair. Ugh. So who did she actually like? Wes or Luca? I decided to do a test to find out. So I cuddled up close to Luca and leaned my head on his shoulder. And as expected, Aubrey was glaring at me with jealous eyes. Then, as she twirled a strand of her hair around her finger, she asked him, "Luca, Wes is busy this Friday, and I can't miss my dance lesson. Could you take me there and wait around till class is over?" Luca looked awkward, but not knowing what else to say, he muttered out, "Yeah, sure." Ugh! Now she's being too much. I needed to show her that Luca wasn't interested in her, and that she needed to back off. I know, that sounded a bit mean, but seriously, I needed to make a stand, or else I could lose my boyfriend. So on Friday evening, after Luca drove Aubrey to her dance class, I called him and said that my bike had a flat tire. Yeah, I may have punctured it myself, but it did the trick. He immediately picked me up and drove me home. Then I asked him to stay as Mom was making her signature lasagna. He couldn't say no to my mom, so he texted Aubrey to tell her to go home by herself because he was busy with me. Success! The next day, the four of us hung out at the cafe. Luca noticed Aubrey looking a bit tired, so he asked, "Hey Aubrey, are you okay?" "Oh, it's nothing. After dance class, I walked home and it rained all of a sudden. And I didn't bring an umbrella because I thought you would bring me home, so I got drenched." I glanced at Luca, and I could see he was feeling really guilty. After chatting a bit, I went to the restroom to freshen up. That's when I caught Aubrey dabbing powder on her face to make her look paler. I couldn't believe it. That's so not cool. I needed to confront this big fat liar. Do you seriously think guilt-tripping Luca will make him love you? I don't have to make him do anything, 'cause he already loves me. With a shocked look, I spluttered out, What did you just say? Oh, didn't he tell you? Luca and I used to date, but then I got tired of him and broke up with him. He was so devastated. Now, seeing him with you, I realized I made a mistake. He should be with me. My God, I couldn't believe what she just said. How could he hide this from me? I couldn't contain my anger anymore. You're just a psycho who likes to play dirty tricks all the time. Then I stormed out of the restroom and bumped into Luca.
Did you just yell at Aubrey? Don't be so mean. She got sick because I hung out with you yesterday.
Ugh, just great. Now Luca only overheard me screaming and thought I was the meanie now. But then I realized Aubrey was right. Luca was clearly still in love with her, because if he wasn't, he would have asked for my side of the story first, before defending her so quickly. Luca, I think we should break up, as you clearly still have feelings for Aubrey. Then without letting him say anything, I brushed past him and left. The next day, I decided to wake up early and go for a run, to try and clear my head. But as soon as I opened the door, I saw Luca standing there. I acted like he was invisible and was about to walk away, but he grabbed my arm and said,
Please, Michelle, at least hear me out.
So we sat on the porch and Luca opened up to me. Turns out it was true that Luca and Aubrey used to date, but they argued all the time, so he ended things with her and they stayed friends. He didn't mention their past relationship to me because he thought it wasn't a big deal, as it's all over now. He said that after I broke up with him, he spoke to Aubrey to figure out what had happened between me and her. Then she confessed that she was still in love with him and was only dating Wesley so she could be around him. Luca rejected her, and she started crying, which caused her makeup to smudge. That's when he realized I was right about her faking being sick, and he made it clear that her sneaky behavior meant they couldn't be friends anymore.
Michelle, I'm sorry. I should have seen what she was doing and put you first. I promise it won't happen again.
Poor Luca. I couldn't stand seeing him looking so gloomy. To be fair, all he did was just trying to be a good friend to Aubrey. He deserved another chance, right? So, smiling, I gave him a big hug. From that moment on, things between us were great again. Wesley eventually found out that Aubrey was only using him to get close to Luca, so he broke up with her. Our love story was surely a bumpy ride, but it was all worth it, 'cause I truly love Luca, and I also love how he cares about his friends and wants to spend time with them. So I only asked him for some alone time every Friday. Talking of Fridays, I can't wait for this one, as Wesley told me that Luca's prepared something special for me. Eek! I'm so excited! Sorry guys, but you won't know what it is, as my story has to end here. Maybe next time! This? Or this one? Ugh, this is such an impossible decision. It's my senior year, so I wanted this last prom to be the most memorable. I wonder which guy will ask me to prom first. Adam's cute, but he's so hot and cold with me. Then there's Devin, the school's hottest swimmer. Oh, and I also heard rumors that Ethan, the most popular jock in school, was planning to ask me to prom at the next baseball game. My buzzing phone broke me from my thoughts. It was a message from my friend Donna saying, Phoebe, have you seen the news? Lockdown starts tomorrow! Oh my God, this couldn't be legit. Could it? What about prom? Then I received another message from the prom committee.
Due to the current rule changes, unfortunately, prom's been cancelled.
No! Unbelievable! My prom! It was another message. Jeez, I was getting sick of them. I hoped it would be Donna telling me this was all a joke and prom wasn't canceled, but no. I glanced at it and saw a text message from Jacob, a classmate I never spoke to. That's weird. Curious, I opened the message. Hey, Jacob. So, what do you want to ask me?
Hi, and, can you help me model for a moment? I'm applying for the Art Institute in Chicago, and the application deadline is tomorrow. But I need to submit a drawing.
I'll be posing for you to draw? But I've never modeled before. This sounds super important. Shouldn't you ask a professional?
Well, don't worry. I already have all the ideas, and I think you are the most suitable person to model for me, as you're a natural beauty, and that will show in my work. Especially your beautiful eyes.
Okay then, if you say so. Let's do it. Jacob then instructed me how to pose. After that, he took out a piece of paper and started sketching carefully. Meanwhile, I was sitting there trying my best to help my friend by not moving. Now that I had time to really look at him, I think Jacob is really handsome. Especially when he's so focused on drawing like this. Why has it taken me 3 years of high school to realize this? Strange. How can such a good-looking guy be pretty much invisible in my class? Maybe it's because he's a little on the shy side?
Done. What do you think?
Wow! You're so talented! I like it. I like it a lot.
Really? When can we meet again? I'll give you this drawing.
Oh, I thought you were going to send it with your college application.
Give me a sec.
Just like that, he disappeared from the screen without even answering my question. After a while, Jacob returned with a picture frame in his hand. Then he put the picture he'd just drawn of me in it and hung it up in his room.
In the meantime, I'll hang it here, so it's safe and, well, I get to, see you every day.
Why did he say it like that? He's totally making me blush by now. What about your college application?
Actually, I submitted them already.
So, you tricked me?
I'm sorry, it's not like that. Actually, I wanted to ask you something else, but because I'm really nervous, I ended up blurting out that I wanted you to model for me instead.
So what exactly do you want to ask me? If you don't talk, I'll hang up.
Wait! I know it's canceled and all, but I don't want to spend the rest of my life not knowing your answer. So, if I asked you to go to prom with me, would you say yes?
I don't know. Only when I receive an official invitation will I consider it. I was giggling to myself at this point. Our class's shyest guy was being so genuine. But then he took a deep breath and said boldly,
Phoebe, will you come to prom with me?
Aw, I have to admit, I was really touched by Jacob's invitation. So I replied, yes!
Dinner's ready, hun.
Oh, that's my mom calling. I gotta go.
Yeah, you go eat. Thank you. I've received the answer I needed anyway.
I gave him my cutest smile and then ended the video call. Swoon? My heart was fluttering. After that moment, I couldn't stop imagining how great it'd be. Only if we weren't stuck in this stupid lockdown. Jacob would have escorted me to prom and, oh my, imagine how perfect we would look together. Such a pity. Now all I could do was just think about him all day. A few days passed, only Jacob hadn't contacted me. Not once. This made me antsy. I was constantly checking my phone. Then there were times I was so close to texting him first. But for what reason, though? I had nothing to tell him. Aha! Got it!
Phoebe, what happened?
Jacob, I've screwed up.
Calm down and tell me what's happened.
I almost burned the house down.
Huh? What? What did you do?
I forgot to turn off the stove while frying the eggs. You see? Does it look like crime scene evidence?
What have you done to the poor pan?
That worked a treat, as after that, we video chatted almost every day and talked about all kinds of things, from our dreams for the future to our favorite puddings. On the one rare day we didn't chat, I felt myself feeling restless. Is it possible that I was lovesick? One time, while I was standing in the garden talking to Jacob, Nancy, my gossipy sister, caught me. Expectedly, during dinner that night, Nancy told my mother that I had a boyfriend. Ugh, what a snitch. Why did my mother give birth to me and her as well? Fine. And FYI, my mom is one of those super strict types of parents.
Phoebe, what did I tell you? Before graduation, you can't date.
Mom put her fork down and gave me a serious look. But we're just friends.
No buts. From now on, focus on studying and stop contacting him. Understand?
Annoyed, I stormed off to my room. That night, I couldn't sleep a wink. I longed to hear Jacob's voice so badly. I missed him. Then, at midnight, I somehow ended up picking up my phone and texting him. I know it's late, but are you awake? I'm so stupid. Of course he wasn't going to be awake at this. Oh, it's Jacob.
I'm awake. You want to talk?
So he called me, and we talked in whispers so no one overheard me. I told Jacob about the argument with my mom. He advised me not to be angry with her because she just cared about me. Then he said,
On your birthday this year, I'll come over and prove to your parents that you've chosen the right person.
Choose the right person? What do you mean?
I mean, will you be my girlfriend?
I was still feeling somewhat confused when he suddenly started singing.
But darling, just kiss me slow. Your heart is all I own, and in your eyes you're holding mine.
I love that Ed Sheeran song. My heart melted with each word Jacob sang, and I found myself softly saying, I do. Oh my God, he's officially my boyfriend now. This was so exciting. I just wish I was back at school to show him off. We secretly chatted every day, and he was the ray of light in my boring days during the lockdown. But then one day, he didn't reply. I didn't think much of it at first. You know, maybe he was busy drawing or something. But then, when the day was coming to an end, and I still hadn't received a reply from him, I started to freak out. Was he sick? Only at past midnight, he finally messaged me.
I'm sorry. I feel kinda down today, so I couldn't talk to you.
Oh no, why was he so sad? Hearing this, I couldn't be patient anymore. So I called him right away, over and over, but the only response was a long beep, then followed by a text a little later.
I don't want you to see me in this state. I'm sorry.
What was wrong? He was always such an optimistic guy. Something really terrible must have happened to make him feel like that. Feeling anxious, I continued to call him, until eventually he gave in and answered. Then he told me what was wrong. Lockdown was the final straw for his wearing parents, and now they were getting a divorce. I felt so sorry for him. Oh, how I wished I could have run to him right away. He actually only lived a few blocks away from me. So we planned to sneak out to see each other in the park. From a distance, of course. The plan was that I would open the door on the sly to run outside, while Mom was in the kitchen.
Phoebe, what are you doing?
I...
Come inside and set the table. The food's getting cold.
My plan failed completely. I'm sorry, I couldn't get out. My mom caught me. A few minutes later, Jacob's reply showed up. Turned out he'd already snuck out and had been waiting for me at the park. I felt so guilty, so I called him at once. He tried to put on a smile, but I knew he was really bummed out, so I blew him a kiss to cheer him up. This really brightened him up. Then he said that as soon as lockdown was over, he was giving me a real kiss. Just like that, time went on, and we learned how to make the most of this relationship in the pandemic era. Everything was good until One day he told me some news that struck me like a lightning bolt. He'd received an offer letter from the art college in Chicago. He'd got in! Of course, Jacob was excited, and I was really happy for him. But Chicago was a whole different state, so I'd never get to see him. Jacob said he was still wondering if he should go or not, as he didn't want to leave me. Me neither, but how could I tell him not to go? Jacob, please go chase your dream. Don't give it up over a girl whose hand you've never held.
If I go, then what about us?
Just leave it. Whatever will be, will be. After that day, there were no more messages or calls from Jacob. Perhaps he was busy arranging things for college. I missed him so much, but I had to let him live his life. Then, on the same day Jacob left, I received a package. I took it up to my room and opened it. Inside was the painting which he had asked me to model for. It's really beautiful. The painting! Now how am I supposed to forget you when I have to look at this every day, Jacob? The city eventually came out of lockdown, and things were pretty much back to some kind of normal. It was just that I couldn't stop thinking about Jacob and how different things would be if he was still here. We hadn't spoken since that time we broke up. I guess it was easier this way, but it didn't stop it from sucking. And to make it even worse, today's my birthday, and all I could think about was him. I was sitting there trying to fake delight as my family brought me out a cake and sang me happy birthday. Hang on, who's that? Standing behind my parents? Oh my, it can't be! It's Jacob!
Oh, yes. I found this one loitering outside. He seems keen to see you, and, well, it is your birthday, so I suppose I'll let the no boys rule slide for today.
Mom smiled. I couldn't help it. I darted out of the chair and leapt into Jacob's arms. I asked him why he was here, and grinning he replied,
I have a promise to keep.
Then I introduced him to everyone, and being the perfect guy he was, he's really mature and friendly toward my family, and they love him. But soon the day ended, and he went to leave, so with reluctance, I walked him out to say goodbye. Jacob then held my hand and said,
Look, Phoebe, when I was away, I realized how much I like you, and if you have the same feelings, could we give this long-distance relationship a try?
Without giving me time to answer, he continued,
I'll try my best to contact and come back here often. I will never leave you feeling lonely. I promise.
His words were really touching, but, Jacob, I'm sorry. I don't think we can do long distance.
Why not?
'Cause I've applied to College Columbus in Chicago, and I got in. We're gonna be neighbors!